My parents told me I was too sensitive for cutting them off, so I bought a house in another country and let my therapist be my family. I'm a 28-year-old woman, and I always thought family meant unconditional support, until I realized I couldn't rely on mine. Growing up, I learned to walk on eggshells around my parents. No matter what I achieved, good grades, awards at work, even small acts of kindness, they always found a way to belittle it. "That's nice, but your sister did it better. Or are you sure you handled that the right way?" Their words stung more than any criticism from strangers ever could, because I had built my life around wanting their approval. I was emotionally intelligent, fiercely independent, and yet somehow, their constant comparisons and dismissals chipped away at me without me noticing. The fight that pushed me to my breaking point wasn't even huge on the surface. I had told my mom I couldn't attend a family dinner because I needed to finish an important work project. Her response? "You're always overreacting. You're too sensitive. You can't even prioritize family properly." My dad, sitting there, nodded along, adding, "Maybe you should just toughen up. Life isn't going to cater to your feelings." I froze, feeling my chest tighten like I couldn't breathe. All the small moments, the birthday they forgot, the promotion they dismissed, the times they laughed when I tried to voice feelings flooded back. I realized that this wasn't about me being sensitive. It was about them controlling the narrative, making me question my worth, and turning my empathy into a weakness. I left the room shaking, my hands gripping my phone, unsure if I should block their calls entirely. Part of me felt guilty, like I was committing some terrible betrayal by thinking of cutting contact. Another part, the part that had been quietly screaming for years, felt relief just imagining space between us. Could I be selfish if I chose myself? Could I survive if I finally said enough? The thought both terrified and thrilled me. I paced the apartment, listening to the hum of the city outside, feeling the walls close in while my mind raced. I knew something had to change, but I had no idea what it would take or if I'd even have the courage. The moment lingered, heavy and unresolved, like a storm waiting to break. After that fight, I started putting small walls up. I answered their calls less, delayed texts, and tried to keep conversations superficial. It wasn't dramatic at first, but every time I avoided diving into their manipulative tangents, I felt a small surge of relief, like breathing fresh air after years underwater. I began noticing how exhausting it was to constantly defend my feelings, justify my choices, and absorb their endless comparisons. It hit me that this wasn't about a single argument. It was a pattern that had controlled my life since I was a teenager. The first few days were quiet, too quiet. I felt a pang of guilt every time my phone buzzed with a message from them. "We just want you to be happy. Don't be so sensitive. Or family comes first. Don't forget that." My chest tightened. The familiar mix of anxiety and obligation pulling me back in. But I also felt something I hadn't in years, a sense of agency. For the first time, I realized that I could choose how much of them I allowed into my life. One night, sitting cross-legged on my bed, I called my therapist. I need to distance myself from them," I whispered, my voice barely above the hum of the heater. My therapist didn't hesitate. "You've been carrying the weight of their approval for too long. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival." Hearing that out loud made my chest feel lighter, but it also made the next step feel terrifying. Could I really stop answering their texts when I had been programmed my entire life to respond? Could I truly prioritize myself without collapsing under guilt? The more I thought about it, the more the idea of permanent distance became appealing. No more guilt trips, no more comparisons, no more feeling like I was never enough. But uncertainty gnawed at me. I wondered if I was overreacting or if I would someday regret turning my back on the only people I'd ever called family. Every instinct screamed for freedom, yet a deeper part of me trembled at the thought of doing the unthinkable, silencing the voices I had carried in my head for decades. And still, as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, a tiny, rebellious spark whispered, "Maybe." No, I didn't have to let them define me anymore. The first week of intentional distance felt strange, almost surreal. I didn't pick up every call, didn't reply instantly to texts, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of obligation pressing down on my chest. It was like stepping out of a room I hadn't realized was locked. I started noticing small things, how quiet my mind felt when I wasn't preemptively preparing for their criticism, how much energy I had when I didn't spend half the day defending my choices. Even the simplest acts, like deciding what to cook for dinner or which show to watch, felt liberating. Freedom was intoxicating, but it also carried a strange emptiness. Like I was learning to live in a world where the people who had shaped me for decades no longer dictated my every thought. I remember one evening, walking through the park near my apartment, the crisp air filling my lungs, leaves crunching underfoot. I realized I could enjoy the moment without mentally rehearsing the arguments I'd inevitably have with them. It was empowering. For the first time, I didn't feel small, foolish, or too sensitive. I started journaling my thoughts, organizing my finances, and even indulging in hobbies I had abandoned because family responsibilities always came first. Little by little, I could see the person I might become without their constant interference. But even in these moments of clarity, their influence seeped in through messages. "You're making a huge mistake," my mom wrote one evening.
Yes.
Followed by my dad's passive-aggressive, "We're just worried about you."
Yes.
My chest tightened, the familiar anxiety clawing its way back. I knew intellectually that I wasn't doing anything wrong, but emotionally, the guilt tugged at me. It was a reminder that escape wasn't as simple as ignoring their words. They had been woven into my life so tightly that even the quietest message could make me doubt myself that night. I stared at the dark city skyline from my window, realizing that stepping back had given me freedom. Yes, but also a responsibility to myself I had never had before. And somewhere deep inside, I knew the real challenges were only beginning. The walls I had built were fragile, and the storm of their manipulation wasn't done yet. Just when I thought things were stabilizing, the subtle attacks began. It started with carefully worded texts. "We just want what's best for you. Don't shut us out. Or maybe you're overreacting again. It's just your sensitivity." Each message was a needle, designed to prick my confidence and pull me back into guilt. My parents had a way of framing their manipulation as concern, despite my growing strength. I could feel the old panic creeping in the familiar knot in my stomach, the racing thoughts, the self-doubt. They didn't yell, they didn't scream. They didn't need to. Every word was calculated to make me question myself. One evening, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the half-empty cup of tea in front of me, when a message from my mom popped up. "We're worried you're isolating yourself. Friends can't replace family." My hands trembled as I typed a careful reply. "I'm just taking time to focus on myself. I'm okay." I hit send and immediately felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief, because I was asserting boundaries. Dread, because I knew this would only provoke another wave of guilt trips. Passive-aggressive comments, and possibly even attempts to enlist others to pressure me. Even as I reinforced my distance, I noticed their tactics escalating. My sister, whom I had always trusted, began hinting that I was being dramatic, that I had misinterpreted things. Friends tried to reassure me, but I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally were turning against me. I felt like a stranger in my own family, a target for criticism, no matter how carefully I navigated the minefield by the end of the week. I was exhausted physically and emotionally. My apartment felt smaller, the walls closing in with every message. Every call I didn't pick up, every memory of past betrayals. I knew I had taken a stand. But I also realized that freedom wasn't just about distance, it was about surviving the emotional sabotage that came with it. And deep down, I understood that the real test of my resolve was coming, one I wasn't entirely sure I was ready for. It was during one of those nights, when the apartment felt too quiet and my thoughts too loud, that the unexpected happened. I received an email from a recruiter I had long forgotten, offering a position in another country, a fully funded role that included housing and relocation support. I remember staring at my laptop, the hum of the city below, feeling the floor beneath me tilt slightly. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a lifeline, a chance to physically remove myself from the people who had spent decades undermining me. My heart raced as excitement mixed with terror. Could I really leave? Could I start over somewhere? No one knew my history, my failures, or my too sensitive label. I called my therapist immediately. It's amazing, but terrifying. I don't know if I can do this, I admitted, voice shaky. She reminded me gently, you've been surviving emotional manipulation for years. This isn't running away. This is reclaiming your life. Her words sunk in slowly, planting the seed that maybe freedom didn't have to be just emotional, it could be tangible, real, and permanent. But as soon as I allowed myself to imagine the possibility, my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. Are you seriously considering abandoning the family? You don't think about anyone but yourself. My chest tightened, a mix of panic and guilt clawing its way in. I knew she wasn't asking a question. She was attempting to guilt me into compliance. To make me second-guess the one opportunity that could change everything, I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling my fingers hover over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to type back and explain, to reassure her that I wasn't heartless. Another part, the louder part, knew that if I sent anything, I'd be giving her power over me again. Finally, shut the laptop, took a deep breath, and whispered to myself, I can do this. I deserve this. But even as I said it, I felt the shadow of their manipulation lingering, like a storm cloud over the horizon. The path forward was thrilling, yes, but the real challenge, and the true cost of independence was about to reveal itself. Once the decision was made, the reality hit like a tidal wave. Preparing to leave wasn't just packing a suitcase. It was dismantling the life I had built around my family's expectations. Every item I folded into boxes felt like a small act of rebellion. My apartment smelled faintly of coffee and dust as I stacked books, carefully choosing what to bring and what to leave behind. I realized I was leaving more than possessions. I was leaving years of guilt, subtle manipulations, and the invisible chains that had tied me to their approval. But as the move approached, my parents' tactics escalated. Calls came in rapid succession, texts filled with guilt-laden phrases. Are you sure you want to do this? You'll regret leaving us. My mom even sent pictures of the family gathered for dinner, captions like, we're all missing you tonight, crafted to pierce me with the sting of absence. Each message forced my chest to tighten, a visceral reminder that even miles away, they could reach into my life. I tried to focus on logistics, but my mind was a storm of doubt and fear. My sister's subtle barbs were the worst. One night, she called under the guise of concern. You know, not everyone can just pick up and leave. Some of us have responsibilities. Maybe this isn't the right time for you to be selfish, she said, her tone dripping with faux empathy. I swallowed the lump in my throat, reminding myself that her words were just another form of manipulation. But the sting lingered, reminding me how isolated I had felt in this family for years. In the midst of packing, I clung to my therapist's advice. Focus on control where I could. Let go of what I couldn't. I meticulously organized paperwork, flights, and housing details, finding solace in the tangible steps I could take to reclaim my life. And yet, in the quiet moments, when the boxes were stacked high and the city hummed beneath my window, a knot of fear tightened in my stomach. I knew that leaving would not erase the emotional scars they would travel with me if I let them. By the end of the week, I was exhausted, my hands sore from lifting boxes, my mind drained from resisting guilt. The departure was imminent. The moment of freedom was so close, I could almost taste it, but the storm of manipulation wasn't finished yet. And I couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part was still ahead. Stepping off the plane. The air hit me differently, crisp, foreign, and full of possibility. I dragged my suitcase through the terminal, heart pounding, chest tight with a mix of exhilaration and fear. This was it. I was miles away from the people who had spent decades making me doubt myself. The city smelled like rain on concrete, a mix of unfamiliar spices and diesel. And for the first time in years, it felt like the world belonged to me, not my parents. Walking into my new apartment, I paused. Taking in the sunlight spilling through the windows and the faint scent of fresh paint. It was empty, yes, but it was mine. Mine to decorate, to fill with laughter, to build routines that weren't dictated by guilt or comparison. I unpacked slowly, savoring each item I chose to keep, arranging them in ways that reflected the person I was, not the person they wanted me to be. Even the smallest details, a plant by the window, a colorful rug I had picked myself, felt revolutionary. The first night alone was quiet, almost eerily so. My phone buzzed intermittently with their messages, but I didn't answer. My mom, are you really happy or just pretending? My dad, we worry about you. You're making a huge mistake. I felt the familiar pang of guilt, a clawing at the edges of my newfound freedom. But this time, I didn't crumble. I reminded myself that distance was protection, not punishment. I started routines: morning walks, coffee at a nearby cafe, journaling late at night. Each day was a small victory, a stitch in the tapestry of my independence. Yet, beneath it all, I knew that freedom came with its own challenges. Loneliness crept in during the quiet hours, and the echo of their voices lingered, like shadows in the corners of my mind. As I lay in bed that first night, listening to the hum of the city outside and the faint scent of rain on the window pane, I realized something. I had escaped physically, but the emotional battle wasn't over. The real test of autonomy, standing firm against their reach while building a life I truly owned, was only beginning. And deep down, I knew the storm wasn't finished with me yet. Life in a new country was exhilarating, but it was also lonely in ways I hadn't anticipated. I wandered streets lined with unfamiliar shops, inhaling the smells of fresh bread and roasted coffee, feeling both liberated and untethered. My apartment was quiet, and for the first few weeks, that quiet felt like freedom. But as night fell, the silence pressed in, and I realized that escaping my parents physically hadn't erased the years of emotional dependency they had ingrained in me. I craved connection, someone to remind me that I wasn't alone in this. Therapy became my anchor. I scheduled sessions more frequently, leaning on my therapist as a lifeline to navigate the waves of guilt and doubt that still crept in. "You're not abandoning family," she reminded me one morning, her voice steady over Zoom. "You're choosing health. You're choosing yourself. That's not selfish, it's survival." Hearing that over and over helped me rebuild my self-worth. Little by little, like laying bricks for a foundation I could finally trust. I also started reaching out to friends, joining local groups and connecting with colleagues who shared my interests. Slowly, a community emerged around me, not blood-related but bound by respect, empathy, and genuine care. I laughed more than I had in years, and even small victories, like sharing a meal with someone who appreciated me without judgment, felt revolutionary. My chosen family became proof that I didn't need approval to feel loved. But the past had a way of sneaking in. Messages from my parents still arrived, alternating between concern and passive-aggressive digs. "You think you can just leave everything behind?" My mom texted one evening. The knot in my chest tightened, a reminder that emotional distance doesn't guarantee peace. Every buzz of my phone became a potential attack, and even amidst my newfound independence, I had to remain vigilant. As I closed my journal that night, listening to rain tapping against the window, I realized that the real work was ongoing. Freedom wasn't just geographic, it was emotional, and that required constant practice. The choice to live without their approval had been made. But the storm of manipulation still lingered on the horizon, waiting for the next moment to test me. Just when I felt like I was finally finding my footing, the rug was pulled out from under me. One evening, scrolling through social media, I saw a post that made my stomach drop. My sister had shared a story about me, twisted and exaggerated, claiming I was selfish for leaving the family and cutting them off without care. The comments were brutal, people I barely knew criticizing me, repeating the lies she had fed them. My heart pounded, my chest tightened, and for the first time in months, I felt powerless. I had escaped their manipulation physically, but the emotional venom had followed me across continents. I remember sinking onto my couch, phone clutched in trembling hands, the apartment suddenly feeling unbearably small and silent. The hum of the city outside, which once felt comforting, now seemed distant and indifferent. I felt the weight of years of gaslighting, guilt, and comparisons crushing down on me all at once. My mind raced. Had I been wrong to cut ties? Was I really the problem, or had I misjudged them all these years? I cried for what felt like hours, not just for the betrayal, but for the grief of realizing how deeply family loyalty had been weaponized against me. Therapy became my lifeline again. I scheduled an emergency session the next morning, voice raw and trembling as I recounted the betrayal. "It's not your fault," my therapist said, steady and unwavering. "They are trying to control the narrative. You cannot let their lies define you. You've already done the hardest part, choosing yourself." Her words felt like a lifeboat in a storm. But the emotional exhaustion was real, leaving me drained and questioning everything I had worked so hard to build. By the end of that night, I felt broken and isolated in a way I hadn't since my first act of independence. The sense of empowerment I had slowly stitched together was fraying at the edges. I realized that physical distance didn't automatically shield me from emotional warfare, and that the hardest battles those fought within my own mind against guilt, doubt, and betrayal were just beginning. And as I lay awake, staring at the shadows dancing across my walls, I knew the next steps would test me in ways I hadn't imagined. After hitting that low, I knew I couldn't let the betrayal define me or let my parents and sister continue to control the narrative. I started setting firm, non-negotiable boundaries. Every message was filtered, every call screened. I stopped responding to guilt-laden texts, nor to attempts to pull me back into arguments, and deleted any social media posts that allowed their influence to creep in. It wasn't easy. Every notification buzzed like a trigger, and my first instinct was to explain, justify, or apologize. But I reminded myself constantly, I didn't owe them explanations. I didn't need their validation. One evening, my phone lit up with a call from my mom. "We just want to know you're okay. Why are you being so distant?" I took a deep breath and responded calmly, each word deliberate. "I'm fine. I need space, and I'd appreciate it if you respected that. I'll reach out when I'm ready." It was short, firm, and it felt revolutionary. I didn't crumble under guilt. For the first time, I wasn't negotiating my self-worth through their approval. I reinforced these boundaries in other ways too. Friends became my support network. I made sure my apartment felt safe and nurturing, a sanctuary where I could breathe without second-guessing my choices. Every small victory, ignoring a manipulative text, saying no without guilt, standing firm in conversations, felt monumental. I felt my confidence solidifying, like the pieces of me that had been battered for years were finally coming together. Even so, the remnants of emotional manipulation lingered. My parents occasionally tried to test me with subtle jabs. "Are you sure you're doing the right thing? Or we're only worried about you?" But I responded differently now. My voice was calm, my stance unwavering. I knew their concern was a mask for control. I refused to let it dictate my life anymore by the end of that week. I felt a surge of empowerment I hadn't felt in decades. I was still cautious, still healing. But I knew one undeniable truth. I was finally reclaiming ownership of my life, step by step, message by message, boundary by boundary. And I sensed that the true climax, the moment where freedom became irreversible, was just around the corner. It hit me one morning. As sunlight poured through the curtains and dust motes danced in the golden beams, I was free. Not just geographically, not just physically, but emotionally. I didn't have to answer to their judgment, to their constant comparisons, or to their subtle manipulations. The fear and guilt that had haunted me for decades had lost their grip. I had carved a space for myself where their voices were just that, voices, not chains. The real test came when my parents made one last attempt to pull me back into their web. My phone buzzed with a carefully crafted group message. "We just want you to come home for the holidays. We miss you and hope you'll reconsider. You're tearing the family apart." I stared at it for a long moment, my chest tight, but my mind clear. I could feel the old instinct to explain, to placate, to apologize, bubbling up, but I didn't give in. I typed a simple reply, measured and firm. "I wish you well. I'm building my life here and I need you to respect my choices." And then I hit send. The relief was immediate. A weight I hadn't realized I was carrying lifted off my shoulders. For years, their approval had been a currency I thought I needed to survive. Now, I realize I didn't. My therapist, my friends, the life I had built in this new country, they were my family now. People who respected me, who celebrated me, who supported me unconditionally. I finally understood that love didn't have to come with chains. That evening, I sat by the window, listening to the hum of the city and the faint patter of rain against the glass. I sipped tea and felt my chest expand with quiet triumph. I was whole, independent, and unafraid. The fear of being selfish was gone, replaced by an exhilarating sense of ownership over my life. For the first time in decades, I felt peace. And I knew, deep in my bones, that this was permanent. My liberation wasn't temporary, wasn't fragile, and it wasn't up for debate. I had finally chosen myself, and nothing could take that away. Months have passed since that first flight out of my old life, and every day feels like a quiet victory. I wake up to sunlight spilling into my apartment, the scent of coffee brewing in the kitchen, and a sense of calm I never thought I'd experience. I have a routine now: work, friends, hobbies, therapy sessions, but more importantly, I have a sense of emotional stability that no one can shake. The person I am today is not the scared, guilt-ridden version my parents tried to mold. She is strong, grounded, and unapologetically herself. News from my parents still trickles in occasionally. It no longer carries the power to control me. Their attempts at guilt, the subtle digs, and the manipulative stories, they exist, but they're just noise. I read them, acknowledge them, and then set them aside. I've built walls that aren't just protective, they're a testament to how far I've come. And my chosen family, friends, colleagues, my therapist fills my life with love, support, and accountability in ways my blood relatives never could. I even find myself laughing freely now, without scanning every word for hidden criticism or anticipating judgment. I travel, explore, indulge in little joys that I had long suppressed because I was too busy trying to meet impossible expectations. The independence is intoxicating, but what feels even more profound is the peace. I finally understand that family doesn't have to be defined by DNA. It's defined by care, respect, and presence. Sometimes I think back to the scared, anxious woman I was, questioning every choice, suffocating under guilt and manipulation. I whisper to myself, "You made it. You survived them." I mean it not in some fleeting temporary way, but with a quiet, unshakable conviction. I am thriving, not in spite of my past, but because I refuse to let it dictate my future. Looking out my window, the city alive beneath me, I realize the truth I've been chasing my entire life. Love can be chosen, and family can be built. And for the first time, I am fully, gloriously, and unapologetically free.